Hello everyone, just Tom here with a brand new video for you all, and another in my slightly different Dead Space videos, as this will be about a certain character, but not one that you've maybe all been thinking about, in Lexine Murdoch from Dead Space Extraction and Dead Space 2 Severed. I just want to take a quick second and apologise for the large break between this video and my last. I recently went through a bereavement in my family, so I'm coming back from that to making videos once again, and just to thank you all for understanding about where I'm coming from. So, in this video, I shall be discussing Lexine's entire backstory, her character traits, her story in relation to where we meet her in the games, what kind of focus she has and is given, and filling in the blanks between Extraction and Severed, and along with her possibly showing up again and where she may have ended up after Severed, and what she's been doing during the events of Dead Space 3 and beyond. Lexine Murdoch Weller was an Irish Grade 2 surveyor upon the Aegis 7 colony, and is also one of the few known survivors of the second Aegis 7 incident and subsequent necromorph outbreaks on the USG Ishimura and Titan space station. Lexine lived with her father, an extraction engineer on the Aegis 7 colony. As a Grade 2 surveyor, she entered a relationship with an engineer named Sam Caldwell sometime before she was called to excavate the Red Marker. Lexine contacts Sam via rig transmission moments before Caldwell's team head to the extraction point to remove the Red Marker, where Lexine is excited about a surprise plan for Sam that night. She reveals that one of her friends, Leon, is a unitologist, and during the massacre and the mega-events, she contacts him again during the hallucination of his friend Egan. She informs Sam that a number of sectors of the colony have begun to lose life support and that several unitologists committed suicide in Union Square whilst her friend Leon was present. Before he dies, Sam successfully reactivates the numerous life support systems and hears Lexine's voice repeatedly calling to him during said hallucinations. She is his only concern even as he lies dying from a gunshot wound. If you've played through or even watched, you should know that this is the opening chapter to Dead Space Extraction. We are given two main characters to relate with and like throughout the course of this chapter, but as you may think that Sam, who you're playing as, is the main character, it twists into Sam falling into the apparitions of the Red Marker and killing all of his friends and colleagues, and we are then given the main characters of the game and their purpose once we meet Lexine worrying over Sam whilst hiding during all of the madness. During the chaos of the outbreak and necromorph infestation, Lexine's father goes missing, and this is where you find her hiding, with a PSEC pistol to defend her with. She is found by Detective Nathan McNeil and PCSI CEC officer Gabe Weller, and once they encounter the horrors that are transpiring upon the planet's surface, they encounter a man buried in a rubble named Warren Eckhart, a crew member from the USG Ishimura. He mentions that a surveyor shuttle is waiting in a maintenance bay in Sector 8, which they proceed towards to escape the planet. I'm going to fast forward through many of the events that transpire within Dead Space Extraction, because if I go through Lexine's extraction story in full detail, I'll just be reading the entire story of the game, as she is the main character of said game after all. So I'll speak through the main points of Lexine's character development, but I may end up waffling on through Dead Space Extraction because it is a very good game. Once the four survivors of the outbreak on Aegis 7 land upon the USG Ishimura aboard the Vestry, they immediately realise their horror has only just begun, as the entire ship has been overrun with necromorphs. Once they make their way around the Ishimura, Lexine suddenly gets a nosebleed, to which she is told to man up by Weller, whilst Eckhart asks for her to have time to recover. They are encountered by other PCSI officers who subdue them and are taken to the quarantine wing. This is where major events of the first Dead Space begin to get intertwined with Extraction and other side stories. The group are examined by Nicole Brennan, Isaac Clarke's girlfriend, and notes that Lexine has very high blood pressure and brain activity that is off the charts. The group are cleared by Nicole, saying that they are free from the infection that currently plagues the ship. Lexine notices Eckhart studying her medical records and asks if he needs any help, but Eckhart dismisses her concerns and collapses from dizziness. After a quarantine lockdown, to which Nathan successfully manages to override, they encounter an infector that brings new necromorphs to them to overcome. After finding the body of Captain Benjamin Matthias, they group together to find the nearest tram station, but are once again attacked by a grabber, falling down a ventilation shaft which collapsed underneath them due to a weak cover. Lexine begins to complain of another headache and briefly reminisces over wanting to visit the Ishimura as a child, and reveals that she was born on Earth when Eckhart asks for her birthplace. Shortly after this, Lexine is attacked by a group of swarmers that drop onto her from the overhead pipes and is dragged down underneath the water and presumed dead by her friends. Lexine is later discovered by Dr. Catherine Howell, who works on the hydroponics deck of the ship. Howell leads her to a medical room where she works up a concoction for Lexine's nausea and headaches. Lexine is convinced that her friends are still alive, but Howell reluctantly brings her out to find them where they encounter a brute, which they do defeat whilst Howell does defend Lexine. Once Lexine and Newell find the others, Lexine, Nathan and Weller all go ahead to the tram station to secure transport, while Eckhart stays behind with Howell to keep back the necromorph forces. But once Eckhart reunites with the others without Howl, Lexine is forced to stop Nathan from shooting Eckhart as Nathan confronts him on Howl's whereabouts, to which Eckhart responds by telling Nathan that Howl locked herself inside to stop the necromorphs, and mentions that there is nothing he could do to stop her. Shortly after this, things get even more interesting with the plot of Extraction and Lexine. Weller discovers that Eckhart is a unitologist overseer, reporting that Aegis 7 and Ishimura incidents to an unknown person named Enigma Lang or Enigma Lange. This sets up the ending of Extraction, and we are about to discover where Lexine places into all of this. He has already been aware of Lexine's immunity to the effects of the marker, and is a person of interest for the Church of Unitology. He admits that he intends on bringing Lexine to the Church, but that she should never know of her true purpose, as she would not understand it. Weller is assured by Eckhart that this is for the good of humanity, but alas, he is attacked and killed by a Liber before he can reveal any further information. Lexine continues to mourn the loss of Dr. Howl, wishing she could save more than their group. During a discussion about Weller between Nathan and Lexine, they intercept an ongoing transmission from Nicole. As the video is one way, the two are unable to prevent Nicole's suicide and witness her die. This, of course, is the catalyst of the beginning of the first Dead Space game. Distraught by what she has witnessed, Lexine believes that her very presence is a curse to all of those around her, holding herself responsible for the deaths of Howl, Sam, and her very own father. Once they arrive at the seemingly deserted Bay 47, Lexine finds Eckhart's dead body and Weller unconscious in the comms room, and alerts Nathan immediately. Weller explains that Eckhart was responsible for Howard's death and shot him, and suspects that he went crazy, just like everybody else. The ADS cannon needs to be shut down before they can escape. This is the very reason as to why the ADS cannon has been shut down for Isaac in Dead Space. And as soon as Weller is injured, Nathan is the only one who can do it and proceeds to the cannon. Lexine stays back to make sure that Weller is treated for his injury. She helps Weller regain consciousness with a syringe of painkillers and word of Nathan's return, but noticing that the message was from a while ago. Lexine tries several times to hail Nathan, but to no avail, and decides that they need to leave. Lexine and Weller defend the ship for a certain amount of time from the necromorphs, and during a lull, Lexine leaves Weller to defend the shuttle while she starts the engines, despite her inability to actually fly a ship. They hold off long enough for Nathan to reach them. Nathan returns with one of his arms severed from an attack from the spider necromorph on the hull of the Ishimura. They manage to push back the necromorph attack and escape the Ishimura, leaving their nightmare behind. They intercept a transmission from the USG Kellyan, which is responding to the distress call sent out from the Ishimura. Lexine futilely cries out for them to turn back, but the transmission does not get through the debris field from the planet crack. After they have a brief moment to collect themselves from their horrible ordeal and mention making their way to the sprawl, Nathan succumbs to his wounds and transforms into a necromorph. Upon attacking Lexine, she grabs a pistol to shoot down the McNeil slasher just before he reaches her. Lexine and Weller are the only apparent survivors of either Aegis 7 and USG Ishimura incidents and successfully made it to the Titan station. Things fast forward after this. We speed up just after the release of the second Dead Space game. Visceral has released the DLC Dead Space 2 Severed, which is a fantastic piece of downloadable content. It is in the same vein as Extraction, but in a much shorter capacity. It takes place alongside Dead Space 2 in several different areas of Titan Station, where you come across Isaac Clarke's destruction just after he's actually left certain areas. The main story is that after the events of Extraction, Lexine and Gabe become permanent residents of the Sprawl. Both the Aegis 7 and USG Ishimura incidents were labelled as a terrorist attack conducted by Dr. Isabel Cho. Lexine and Gabe remain silent about their status as survivors and witnesses of the necromorph infestation. Curious about the effects of their adventure and aware of Lexine's immunity, EarthGov and the Unitologists begin to monitor them. Both organizations maintain their distance to avoid drawing the suspicions of the survivors, and the project known as Project Oracle continued. The project apparently relies on Lexine's ability to reproduce. If she is successful, capturing Lexine and her child to study the marker's effects on the child if her immunity was passed on to them is a high priority. At some point, Lexine and Gabe are married, and during the next 3 years both live in the Sprawl without incident. Lexine presumably maintained her position as a surveyor, while Gabe would work for the Titan Station Security Force. It was not until later did they both decide it was time to conceive a child. When the outbreak aboard the Sprawl occurs, Lexine is contacted by Gabe in the mines during a fertility session at the Titan Memorial Medical Center. As she received results of her test, Gabe warned her of the necromorph's return and urged her to reach their shuttle. Lexine loses connection with Gabe as the quarantine in the hospital begins. She contacts Gabe throughout the escape of the mines, informing him that she is unable to breach the panicked crowds to get to the shuttle, and for a second time loses contact with Gabe when she is knocked to the ground by the large crowd. Gabe manages to contact her once again to warn her about the presence of soldiers, and Lexine informs him that she cannot see anything through the mass crowd, but he does warn her to watch out for Victor Bartlett and Sprawl security, as they mean to kill her on orders from director Hans Tideman. Lexine informs Gabe of strange looking men dressed in white, scavenging the hospital and possibly attempting to find her. She contacts Gabe Gabe one final time, unaware that their rig conversations are being tracked by Victor. She warns Gabe that the men in white are almost upon her, allowing Victor to lock onto their exact location within the sprawl. Once Gabe manages to reach Lexine's location, Victor reveals that EarthGov has long since been aware of Lexine's immunity to the marker, and wanted Gabe to conceive a child with her purely for analytical purposes, and Lexine has made Victor's temporary hostage when he reaches her first. Before Victor can even attempt to kill Lexine, the two men in white intervene. Victor uses Lexine as a human shield against the two men, demanding that they back down as he is just simply following orders. The two say that they're also following orders to receive Lexine, just as he has. They use an unknown device on Victor to render him unconscious. The two men apprehend Lexine. She calls for Gabe's help. Aware of his identity, the men flee with Lexine to escape alive from the servants. Lexine has been taken away to the hospital shuttle bay. The two men are attacked by two infectors. As this transpires, Lexine retreats to within the confines of the shuttle just as Gabe arrives, and once he makes his way there, the two men are transformed into Twitchers. Gabe manages to kill them and orders a relieved Lexine to get the shuttle ready for takeoff. Once Gabe manages to lock down the bay to get set for the oncoming vacuum, Victor arrives at the last second, armed with a live grenade, but Gabe retaliates by knocking Victor to the ground before the grenade detonates. The blast kills Victor and severely cripples Gabe in the process. His leg has been severed, his helmet partially smashed open, his health depleted. Gabe must fight off one more round of the Necromorph horde, as Lexine can only watch on from the shuttle, unable to help. Gabe destroys the bulkhead doors as Lexine's shuttle launches and escapes the station. She cries out for Gabe, who collapses after the bulkhead doors are open. Her current status in an EarthGov file is labelled as missing. Like Isaac Clarke, she is now a target of EarthGov with an immediate termination order if found. This is the very last time that we see Lexine. I, like many other fans, were hoping for some form of interaction between Isaac, Lexine and Gabe, but all we got were slight little hints of Isaac throughout the story of Severed. It was terrible, but Visceral really made us want so much more, and it's a shame that we may never get to see what exactly happened to Lexine after the events of Severed. An interesting point to take note of is that after Gabe dies, the text from EarthGov states that subjects' remains have been collected for study. All records have been deleted. So another little side story about Gabe's remains could have been planted there, but Titan Station was destroyed in the end by Isaac, so that may have been nipped in the bud. But Lexine's whereabouts are a whole other story. So what do you all think about Lexine? Do you think that she should come back or could come back one more time? I personally, for one, would love to see a meeting of the two survivors of the USG Ishimura incident. Lexine and Isaac would work extremely well together. Lexine has a strong will about her, which she uses to help McNeil, Eckhart and Weller from arguing with each other constantly, and she could easily help Isaac cool down if he ever goes into another dementia spiral. Isaac and Lexine both have their connections to the marker, which can be used very well as appearing in a further installment in the final takedown of the Necromorph horde. With Isaac having the ability to create and destroy markers with the codes imprinted within his brain, and Lexine's immunity and the fact that she seems to be able to keep others close by immune from the marker's effects, this could be a fantastic duo if done right. So what do you all think of her story? Do you think she would have met Isaac through travels? What were her whereabouts maybe during the events of Dead Space 3, and what was she doing? Was she on the run, or was she planning something similar to Isaac? Leave your comments below, curb stomp that like button and subscribe for more future Dead Space content. Thanks again guys, goodbye, and all men be praised.